In this first video then, we'll be building our sign up and login screen and also the user list table view controller as well. So let me show you what we're going for. It's going to be extremely simple. We're just going to enter a username and then the system will attempt to log the user in. If that fails, it will attempt to sign the user up. So this is really designed for single use messaging because once someone knows your username, they can impersonate you very easily if they want to. So I'll just choose a random username and then that will log the user in. And then we can see the user list right there from Pass Server, as well as a nice logout button as well. So that's it. Hopefully it won't take you too long. Best of luck. All right then, here we go. So I'm going to start by jumping over to aws.amazon.com to set up our Pass server on EC2. We'll sign into the console. I'm already logged into Amazon, so it should take me in straight away. Here we go. So as we're now familiar with, we're going to set up on EC2 and then we'll launch a new instance with the big blue button. Click on AWS Marketplace. Search for Pass. And go for the Pass server powered by Bitnami. Then we'll choose the T2 Micro. Make sure it's on the free tier. And then we'll click the Review and Launch button. Then click Launch, and we'll go for a new key pair. And I'll call this Snapchat key pair. Save it on the desktop, and then we'll click Launch Instances. Okay, that'll take a little while to set up. So let's do the Xcode side. So over to Finder, I've got my Pass project.zip file. Remember, if you need to download it again, you can get it from iosdevelopercourse.com/course content 10/pass project.zip. There we go. And then once it's downloaded and you've double clicked on it, it should look like that. Pass server project. So I'll rename the folder Snapchat and then we'll open up the project in Xcode. There we go. And all we should need to do is update the server URL. So let's see how our new instance is getting on. Click on it there. Okay, we've got our public DNS, so we'll set that up. And it's http:// that URL and then /pass. Okay, so now our app is all set up. Let's run it on the iPhone 6. And at the same time, we'll test out the Pass dashboard. No, we're not quite ready to go yet. Well, that's fine. We'll jump back over to Xcode and we'll build our storyboard while we're waiting. So what we're going for here is really a kind of burner messaging application. So one that you'd really only use once. So that enables us to have a really simple login and sign up setup. So let's bring in our label. Try that again. There we go. And we'll use Snapchat/Wicker as our title. There we go. And we're just going to have a single text field this time, which will be for the username only. And we'll have a placeholder of enter a username. And then we'll have a simple button which will allow them to either sign up or log in. And this time, instead of alerts, we'll have a message label underneath to give them an error should there be one. And we'll make that red to make it clear that something's gone wrong. And we'll give it a few lines should it need them. Okay, so that's our layout. While we're here, let's take a moment to just check. There we go. So our apps is now set up, and indeed we have our test object to correctly uploaded as well. So everything seems to be set up on the pass server side. All right, so straight over to the assistant editor, and let's get, oh, no, we're not there. ViewController.swift, there we go. And then let's drag in, which I'll call sign up or login. We don't need an outlet this time because we're not going to be changing sign up modes or anything like that. And then we'll just call that the error label. There we go. Right, so now we're good to go. So over to ViewController.swift, and we're going to do pretty much everything in the sign up or login method. So first off, we'll do a quick check to see if username text field .text is empty. And if it is, then we'll set the error label text to a username is required. And if it's not, then we'll first attempt to log the user in. So we'll do that using pfuser.login with username, and we need a block. There it is. So the username is going to be username text field.text, and that will definitely have a value because it's a text field, and in fact we know it will have a non-empty string value as well. The password, I'm just going to use the same password for every account because we're only requiring a username to log in here, so it really doesn't matter what the password is. Then we'll open up our block and we'll check to see if there's an error. And if there is, we'll attempt to sign the user up. If there isn't, then we'll print logged in. Okay, so now we need to write the sign up code here. So we'll create a new PF user. We'll set the username to be equal to username text field.text, and we'll set the password to be equal to password. And then we just sign the user up in the background. Open up the block, and then we've got success and error. So again, if let error equals error, we'll do what we've done before and let our error message be something generic to start off with. Sign up failed, please try again later. But we'll attempt to get an error string from pass, which is going to be error.userinfo error as string. We're going to try and get that and cast it to a string, and if we can, then we'll update error message, whoops, which means we'll need to convert that to a var and set it equal to error string. And then either way, we want to show that error message. So error label dot text equals error message. And we'll need to use a self there and a self there as well. Ah yes, we could just do a check for error not being nil there. That's a slightly neater way of doing it as we're not using that error message anywhere. And let's get rid of our code over in view did load as well, because we don't need to create more of those PF objects. Okay, so now we should have a very, very simple login system, about as simple as it gets, which attempts to log the user in first off, and then if that fails, it attempts to sign the user up, and if that fails, it displays an error message. And just before we run that, let's just remove the app from our phone, and also turn off the automatic user so that a user is only created when we actually sign them up or log them in. Okay, so here we go. I'll put in Rob as the username, sign up or log in. And with any luck that worked. Let's go and have a look and refresh our data browser, and we should have that new user object. And there it is. Wonderful. So it's actually quite difficult to create any kind of error message here other than the empty username one, because pretty much any username, it will either sign them up or log them in. But we can be fairly confident about our error generating code because we've used something pretty similar before. Okay, so I'm going to quickly create some other users while we're here, and then we'll go straight ahead and create the user table. And we'll have Ralphie. There we go. So over to main storyboard, and we'll bring in a navigation controller because we want that extra bit of navigation help as well. Whenever you've got a table view controller, which is then going to link to another view controller, it's usually a good idea to have a navigation controller. Just gives you the back button and a lot of handy automatic setup. Okay, let's just set up a couple of things here. I'll set the title for our root view controller. So I'll just very boringly call it user list. And I'll also bring in a bar button item. Oops, let's drag it there under user list, and yep, that's in the right place now. That will be a logout. And we'll set up a segue from the logout button to our initial view controller, and I'll call that logout. Okay. Now, of course, we'll need a new file or a new class for our table view controller. I'll call this user table view controller. We should be pretty swift at this sort of thing now. So let's connect that up in the usual way, user table view controller, and also while we're here, set the identifier for our cell. Okay. Then we'll have one section, 4 rows. I'm nothing if not consistent. We'll set the reuse identifier to cell. And then we'll set the cell text label.text to test. And we'll also set up a segue from the initial view controller to our new navigation controller. And we'll call this show user table. And we want to run this in the view did appear method. There we go. So we just want to check if pfuser.current is not nil, then we'll perform segue with identifier. The identifier is show user table, and then the sender is the view controller or self. And we'll do that here as well. We'll need a self to access the view controller. And there's one other place we need to do it, and that is here. So if there's no error after sign up, then we'll do that redirect. Okay, and because I'm feeling so confident, I'm going to set up the logout segue as well. So we'll do that in the prepare for segue method. And we'll look for if segue dot identifier equals logout, then we'll log the user out. For which, of course, we'll need our pass functions. So import pass, and then we can use pfuser.log out. Great. So let's take a look. We now should be logged in as Ralphie, I think. Let's have a quick look and make sure all our users have been created correctly. They have indeed. Good stuff. So we should see an immediate redirect to our table view, which will show our user list. Wonderful. Let's just check that we can log out. Ah, yes, we can, but we do need to hide the navigation bar there to stop that from showing on the initial view controller. But that's easy enough. Let's just log in again as someone else. So we'll have Mike this time, and that does the redirect as we'd want it to. So that's all good. Let's just hide the navigation bar, which we can do using self.navigation navigation controller dot navigation bar dot hidden, or is hidden, sorry, is equal to true. And then we'll also set that to false in the viewDidLoad method here, so that if they log out and log back in again, it will display the navigation bar once again. Great. So now it's just a matter of updating the data in our table to show our current users. And we'll do that by creating a usernames array, which is going to be initially an empty array of strings. And then number of rows in section becomes usernames.count. And self a row at index path becomes usernames and then index path dot row. Excellent. So then over in viewDidLoad, let's write some code to download the username. So we'll need a query, and this is going to be a PF user query because it's a query on users. In fact, we can use let here. The only where key that we need is where the username is not equal to our current user's username. There we go. And pop in that again. We know that we're logged in, so we know that we have a username. And then, just for a little bit of variety, I'm going to show you a different way to do the query. So we can define a variable called users and then set that equal to query dot find objects. And we need to do that in a do try catch construction. There we go. And what this does is instead of finding it in the background with a block, it just does it in the flow of the code. So as long as you don't have any code running after that you want to run at the same time as the query, then it's effectively the same as doing it in the background. Generally, I'd always prefer doing it in the background, but I thought it'd be interesting to show you another way this time around. So now let's check that users exists. And if it does, we'll loop through it. And we'll take the usernames array and append the new username to it. And it's coming up with PF object here. So what we'll need to do is actually cast that to a PF user, because this is going to return PF users rather than PF objects. And indeed, it's going to be an array of them, not just one. And here, it's asking us to unwrap that. And again, if it's a PF user, it will definitely have a username, so we can use an exclamation mark there. If you don't want to, then you could just add in an if-let statement around that. And then once we're done, we'll reload the table data. So table view.reload data. Okay, let's take a look. So we should now be able to see our user list appearing nicely on our table view there. Excellent. Our next stage then is to allow users to send a photo to any of these users simply by tapping on them. And that will do in the next video.